Hello, third graders. Mr. Bowlby here again to start a new unit of study. This is going to be social studies. We are in domain 10, the Colonial Americas, lesson 1 today. So let's get started. The Colonial Americas. We're going to set sail across the Atlantic Ocean from England to the Americas and explore lots of fun stuff. Let's first of all start with some vocabulary words that we may want to note that are going to come up in our read aloud. The word alarmed means to be shocked, disturbed, or frightened. Climate is the usual weather conditions of an area over a period of time. Colony, an area settled by a group of people from another country that remains connected to a newly settled area and its people. Established, to be set up, started, or created. False starts, repeated failures at attempting to start something. Plantations, large farms or estates in warming climates, which we'll talk about. Large crops and sometimes single crops like cotton, tobacco, sugar, rice, or indigo. And reliant, to be dependent upon something or counting on someone or something for support. Okay, this might look familiar to you. This is a map of the North American continent and the South American continent, and the ancient empires, the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca empires. Okay, the Native American people, native to the Americas, built vast empires that lasted several hundreds to thousands of years, long before the Americas and areas of what we now call the United States were inhabited by Europeans. Long before that. Here is a map of the United States and the whole North American continent, really, showing you all the different, this isn't a full list, obviously, just some of the different tribes of Native American groups that lived in different areas. You can tell they covered a large portion. I'm sure you learn a lot about those in your Native American unit and are probably still learning those. All right, this is the Viking explorers you also learned about in previous units. Remember Leif Erikson? He was a Viking and the first known European to set foot on the North American continent in an area known as Newfoundland, Canada, right there. Erikson encountered Native American Inuit already living in Newfoundland. So when he came from over here, Norway, he sailed across, past Greenland and all that, into the North American continent. Anyway, that's all background that you probably have already studied. It's good. And the European explorers was another unit of study that you may or may not remember. So the European explorers, Christopher Columbus, Juan Ponce de Leon, Hernando Soto, Francisco Vasquez Coronado, John Cabot, Henry Hudson, and Samuel de la Champlain, came to the Americas after the Native Americans and Vikings. Leif Erikson, not Christopher Columbus, is the first known European to have arrived in the Americas. Some of the explorers in their countries were still exploring and settling in parts of the Americas during the time of Colonial America, which is the time period we'll be talking about in this domain. Over the course of the next few weeks, you will hear about the next phase of North American history, colonial time period, between the late 1500s and middle 1700s, when New England began attempting to establish or set up colonies in the New World. At the time of the colonial settlement, the Americas were indeed a new world to the Europeans because they had no idea anyone settled there. Who remembers what a colony is? A land that's settled by a group of people that are still attached to their homeland. England. Now, the land, obviously, that we're going to talk about was a new world to the Europeans. It wasn't new. Those lands were there. They had already been inhabited by Native Americans and people for thousands of years, for all they know. So at any rate, it just meant a new hope, a new chance at life, new experiences, adventure, those kinds of things. And you'll learn about all those as we go. Right. There's the definition of colony right there. Area settled by a group of people from another country. Okay, here's a map of the colonial Americas that you're going to see quite a bit. England eventually established or set up these 13 English colonies along the east coast, North America, between the Spanish settlements to the south and the French settlements to the north. So there's Spanish down here, and there's French up here in Canada. Why do you think these colonies were settled east coast of North America? Because they're close to rivers, the ocean, stay close to natural resources that they can use. It took a while before we started branching out to the rest of the country. There's a royal portrait gallery. Over the course of the next few weeks, you will hear about some of England's monarchs or kings and queens who ruled during the colonial period. In this domain, you will not hear about every monarch in this picture. Just put my picture there. But these are portraits that are in chronological context. Queen Elizabeth, you will hear about today. She's right there. 13 English colonies were divided into 3 regions. The New England region in the north, Middle Atlantic region in the middle, and Southern region in the south. Geography and climate of each region played a big role in how those regions are categorized and how the colonial cultures of these regions were developed. The 2 words you're going to hear about are geography and climate throughout this domain. Geography describes where a place is located, and the climate is the weather or temperatures it experiences. We've talked about weather and climate before, so we won't go on that again. All right. Geography also describes terrain and types of physical features, like hills, trees, lakes, rivers, oceans, deserts, all that. Now, the development of the colonial period regions were influenced by their area, the culture, the climate, all that stuff, how they were able to grow, what kind of clothes they were going to wear, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to understand more about that as we go. Okay. By 1542, Spanish explorers had claimed a large part of South America, all of Central America, and parts of North America. As you can see on this map, if you look down here at the key, the English had this little area here. The French are this purple, so right here, and of course France. The Portuguese on the South American side, Spanish and Dutch and native peoples of the world are everywhere else here. Basically all over here too. So the Spanish had taken over a lot. This did not go unnoticed by the kings and queens of England, France, Portugal, and the Netherlands. They too sent their explorers off to the New World to claim land and riches for their homelands. Spain had already conquered much of Central South America, so other European nations continued on claiming parts of North America. Before long, there was a race to claim land for these European kings and queens. The settlement and eventual colonization of this part of the New World had begun. Soon, European countries realized that not only could they explore the land for new riches, but they could trade with the people who were already living there. European traders traveled to North America to exchange goods with Native Americans. As a result, some Native Americans learned to speak a little French or English. In turn, many Europeans learned to speak native languages such as Algonquin as well. In the late 1500s, England was becoming more and more alarmed or shocked and disturbed at how much the Spanish were claiming in what is now called Central and South America. The Spanish were not only gaining land, they were becoming wealthier too. It was time for the English to take action. In the 1580s, an English explorer named Sir Walter Raleigh set off to explore parts of North America. During this expedition, he landed on an island called Roanoke Island off the coast of what is now the state of North Carolina. Raleigh returned home, eager to claim this land for England. In 1585, he persuaded Queen Elizabeth I to allow him to send a group of settlers to Roanoke Island. Do you remember which region Roanoke is? Remember I said Carolinas, so that would be southern, right around there, which is also where you get Raleigh, Carolina, by the way. Queen Elizabeth agreed, however. When the settlers got there, they found it difficult to survive in this land. This was especially true in the winter because they were not able to plant crops. When the settlers ran out of food, many people starved to death. As soon as they could, the demoralized settlers returned to England. In April 1587, the English made a second attempt to settle on Roanoke Island. This time, a man named John White led more than 100 men, women, and children, including his own daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband, to establish a new colony, a colony in the New World. Okay. Once again, the settlers faced the same challenges. And as their supplies ran low, however, this time only John White and a small crew sailed back to England for supplies, while the others remained in the colony. Just 9 days before they returned to England, his daughter had a baby, and he named her Virginia Dare. White's granddaughter was the first English baby born in the New World. Pretty cool, huh? Now, when White and his crew arrived back in England, he learned the country was at war with Spain. He could not return to Roanoke Island. It was not until 1590 that he was able to take a ship and return to the colony. When White finally arrived back on Roanoke Island, what do you think he found? Sadly, he found nothing. Well, the island was still there, along with some abandoned dwellings, but the colonists were nowhere to be found. So how long did John White take to return to the island? How many years? 3 years. It's a long time for a lot of stuff to happen. White's only clue to where the colonists might have gone was the word Croton, carved into one trunk, and the letters CRO carved into another. Croton was believed to be the name of an island about 50 miles south of Roanoke Island. John White thought the carving may have been a message that the settlers relocated to that island. John White tried to go to Croton Island to find the colony, but a huge storm damaged his ship and forced the crew to return to England. White was never able to return to the New World again. The mystery of what happened to these English settlers remains unsolved today. Roanoke Island has become known as the Lost Colony. The current research does indicate that the settlers may have relocated northwest of Roanoke Island, based on evidence from a very old map. Archaeologists plan to explore that area for traces of the settlement. So you can go online and actually look up Roanoke Island. There's a pretty neat tourist attraction there now, and it's interesting stuff. Now, one reason many early English settlers struggled to survive was because they were not prepared for how different their lives would be on this new land. It took several attempts before they figured out how to survive in a place where the climate, soil, landscape, plants, animals, and people were quite different from anything they had known before. Eventually, the colonists learned how to use natural resources that were available to them when they became less reliant on supplies from England. Now, these are some good questions to remember what climate means, and geography, and the word reliant, of course, means that you are relying on somebody else for your needs. It's important to be able to do things yourself. And so after a number of difficult years and false starts, England eventually established small settlements up and down the east coast of North America. Initially, these settlements were nothing more than tiny villages. Over time, the villages became known as towns. By the 1700s, many of the towns had grown into cities, and there were centers of trade and industry. In the end, 13 successful English colonies were established in North America. As the 13 English colonies began to take shape, they were naturally divided into 3 distinct regions: the New England, Middle Atlantic, and Southern regions. These regions were different from each other in many ways. For example, in New England, because of the colder climate, rocky terrain, and poor soil, it was difficult for the colonists to farm many crops. So you can see the industries listed here. You have fish, ships, timber, it's like logging, wood for houses and stuff, wheat, furs, iron, cattle, tobacco, rice, and indigo. You can kind of tell where those different regions were mostly. Indigo is a lot more in the southern region here, along with rice and tobaccos right here in the middle, shipping and logging all the way up here. So instead, New England became known as the center for fishing, furs, timber, and shipbuilding. In the Middle Atlantic region, a wide variety of crops can be grown because of the milder climate and rich soil. As a result, agriculture, including cattle, wheat farming, became a successful way of life for many. In the warm, sprawling southern region, people created large farms called plantations, where they could grow large amounts of different crops, such as rice and tobacco. As you can see here on this map. People came to North America at different times for many different reasons. Some came to get rich, whereas others came for religious reasons, which we're going to talk about later. Some hoped to escape poverty, and some simply curious or adventurous. English monarchs played an important role in the establishment of the colonies, particularly Elizabeth I, James I, Charles I, Charles II, and George II. As we travel on our journey, we will refer to the regional map of colonial America and the Royal Portrait Gallery, and figure out what kind of timeline we can make out of all of that. So are you ready to go on your journey? Good, because the next lesson covers Jamestown, Virginia. I'm going to ask you about predictions about Roanoke Island, but here's that picture again. Now, you probably heard the story about chromosome carved into a tree. Kind of makes you wonder what happened to all those settlers, though. It's still a big mystery. Several hundred years later, nobody knows. It wasn't written down whatever happened. Here's some questions for you to review the lesson. I'll just slide through here so you can look at them over on your leisure. Quiz yourself. The unsuccessful attempt to colonize Roanoke. John White. So Sir Walter Raleigh and John White both failed at colonizing Roanoke. European developments. This is a good map to refer to when you're trying to figure out which groups of countries were where at that point. Okay. Very good. Got Spain, France, and Canada, southern parts of South America, and all that's covered by Spain. All right, good job. And of course, the Native Americans were all here before anybody else was. Let's not forget that. 13 colonies, 3 regions. And those are the Middle Atlantic, New England, and the Southern. Southern and Middle Atlantic are pretty easy to remember. Okay, so until the settlers became established and adapted to their new environments, how do you think they survived? They were reliant on England for help. Now this question is going to show up in your discussion today for your lesson, so you're going to have to answer this. For what you have heard so far, how would you compare and contrast? How are they similar and how are they different? All 3 regions, including geography, climate, and main industries. Refer back to that map I showed you with the different industries and where they are, and compare and contrast. And here's a little guide to help you with answering that question, which I'm going to let you pause instead of just sit here and hope that you're reading it all. Good. Okay. We're going to skip the word work for this lesson. And the synonyms and antonyms. Again, good stuff for you to read, though. Okay, timelines of America. Obviously, we're not in the classroom, so we're not going to make a physical timeline on the board like I'd like to, but it's kind of cool to pull out the pictures that I show you and see where they fit in and which colonies were established when. This is obviously those ones we looked at the beginning of the lesson. Many other civilizations were developed, and events occurred during the time we are talking about before and after. And you could say the European explorers, 1587. Okay. All right, so Roanoke right here, 1587. That's when we had this whole thing. We will continue to add to this timeline throughout the domain, so you'll understand a little bit better when the colonies were founded and what order they were founded in. You will be responsible for learning 4 dates in this domain. One of them is 1587. Okay, and this is another thing you can do in your notes to kind of help you remember about each colony. Southern, Middle Atlantic, and New England. We'll just do Southern today. Southern settlements like Savannah, Georgia, which we haven't talked about yet. One crop tobacco, Oglethorpe, who you will learn about later. And the tobacco crop you'll learn about later too. Unprepared, because that's much like the colonists, we're definitely unprepared. Tobacco, humidity in that area, English colonies, Roanoke Island, and Native Americans. That is it for this lesson, my friends. Third graders, you are awesome. Hope you get to that discussion post and answer any questions you have. Just email me or message me on Dojo if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Goodbye.